Imagine a pickup truck rolling across the Sahel at dusk. Dust hangs in the air. A new flag is painted on the tailgate. The driver passes an abandoned foreign outpost and a billboard that promises security, sovereignty, and cheap bread. On the radio, a talk show host says the old era is over and a new partner has arrived. Some listeners cheer. Others hold their breath. Tonight, we step into that road and trace the story behind it, how Russia is reshaping power, security, and everyday life across West Africa, and why this shift matters far beyond the Sahel. Stay with me, because by the end you will see not just what is happening, but how it could change the region's future and affect the wider world. Start with the map. Look at the broad band of land from the Atlantic coast to the shores of the Sahara. For years, that belt has endured insurgencies, coups, and the unraveling of once familiar partnerships. In the vacuum left by old allies and institutions losing traction, Moscow saw opportunity. It offered quick security packages, political backing without public lectures, and food shipments when supermarkets were running bare. To many leaders who felt cornered, that pitch landed like rain after a long dry season. Here is how the offer works in practice. When a military government in the Sahel faces an insurgent push and international isolation, Moscow sends trainers and advisors who arrive fast, often with air defense systems or helicopter parts. A media strategy appears the very same week. Influencers and talk shows shift the conversation to themes that resonate: sovereignty, dignity, and the end of dependency. Grain shipments are announced and highlighted in evening news. A promise is made to treat partners as equals. The message is simple and powerful: you asked for respect, and here it is. Security is the heart of the pitch. In capitals that have seen parades of foreign uniforms come and go, Russian support is presented as direct, unembarrassed, and focused on battlefield outcomes. Troops get training with fewer conditions. Some governments trumpet new defense agreements as proof that the country can still choose its friends. In the streets, people who are exhausted by kidnappings and road ambushes do not ask for policy papers, they want the gunfire to stop. If a new partner says it will stop the gunfire, they will listen. But this is not a one-dimensional story. It is a bargain, and every bargain has a price. The first price shows up in the headlines about rights abuses and the fog that settles around military operations. The second price shows up in the economy, where gold and uranium deals become political tools, and where one supplier of food or fuel can become a lever of influence. The third price shows up in regional politics: old blocs fracture, passports change, and neighbors who once moved together now pull apart. To understand why the Russian offer resonates, step back to the years when many Sahelian societies felt that outside partners promised a security turnaround that never arrived. Villagers saw school roofs rot and health posts close while militants taxed the roads. Parents waited for the promised jobs forever on the horizon. Then a coup happened, and the new leaders said they would try something different. The new something often came with Russian uniforms or contracts. To people living through crisis, outcomes matter more than ideology. If the new partner seems to move faster, that alone can win the day. Consider the new regional reality. 3 Sahel states led by military governments set out to build a separate path, drifting from a regional bloc that had anchored travel, trade, and diplomacy for decades. They talked not only of solidarity but of a shared front against the insurgencies that bleed across borders. In their rhetoric, Russia became a friendly power willing to help without preaching. Street rallies featured banners praising new alliances and denouncing the old. That political theater was not the whole story, but it mattered. It shifted what people imagined was possible. The information space is central to this shift. Pro-government pages and broadcasters repeat the sovereignty narrative, and Moscow-aligned outlets amplify it. Stories celebrate new helicopters touching down, instructors training recruits, and food aid unloading at port. At the same time, critics point to the lack of transparency, to reports of villages caught in the crossfire, and to the way these narratives drown out uncomfortable questions. When information is war by other means, whoever frames the story shapes the battlefield. Economics binds the new relationships. Food is politics when bread is expensive. Grain donations and fertilizer deals ease pressure in cities where a bag of flour can make or break a household budget. Energy and mining are even more political. When a major uranium license is revoked from a Western company, it signals more than a contract dispute. It says the resource map is being redrawn, and new partners may take old seats at the table. Gold flows, too, become part of the chessboard, as governments look for revenue and outside powers look for leverage. If you walk through a barracks where recruits strap on night vision gear for the first time, you will hear gratitude for any ally who brought them equipment that works. If you walk a market where spice sellers complain about transport taxes and empty shelves, you will hear cynicism about any leader who promises more than they can deliver. Both voices are true. The rise of Russian influence is happening in the collision of those realities, security needs that cannot wait, and economic pressures that never sleep. Let us talk frankly about the record. In some places where Russian-linked fighters have helped government forces, militants have still spread, and civilians have suffered. Rights groups and local reporters have documented ugly episodes that hang like a shadow over the promise of quick victory. Supporters say the old foreign missions failed for years and that this is a necessary reset. Critics answer that secrecy and impunity are not a strategy, and that insurgencies feed on abuses like a fire feeds on wind. There is also the question of staying power. Quick wins on paper can mask long slogs on the ground. Pushing militants out of a town is one thing. Keeping that town open for schools and clinics is another. Keeping roads safe for trucks full of grain is a third. Lasting security requires police who are paid, judges who are trusted, and mayors who can fix the well without calling the capital. Those are state-building tasks, not battlefield moments, and they are where any outside partner's promises are tested. Now widen the lens to the region. Coastal states that remain anchored in older partnerships watch the Sahels turn toward Moscow with concern. They fear that insurgents squeezed in one place will slip into their forests and cities. They also worry that a divided region makes cross-border operations harder and smuggling easier. At the same time, they must answer their own publics who demand faster security results and cheaper food. The pull of sovereignty rhetoric is not limited to any one border. Every government in West Africa is now translating the same message into its local politics. Western powers are recalibrating in response to this shift. Some have pulled troops out under pressure. Others are trying to rebuild ties through diplomacy and aid rather than boots on the ground. In Washington, Paris, and Brussels, officials debate how to work with a region where the old playbook no longer fits. Some argue for patience and humility, partnering on what communities say they need most: roads, jobs, clinics, and schools that stay open. Others warn that pulling back too far leaves a vacuum that rival powers will fill. Meanwhile, Moscow keeps showing up with what it markets as speed and respect. For everyday people, the scoreboard is simpler. Can they get to market without paying a bribe at each checkpoint? Can their kids return to class? Can buses run after sunset? Does bread cost less this month than last? If the answers trend in the right direction, any government's new foreign friends will be welcomed at least for a while. If not, those friendships will become slogans without substance. The media environment also shapes perceptions of success. Telegram channels blast footage of parades and new uniforms. Radio shows host callers who say they finally feel heard. Opposition voices argue that the price is hidden, opaque mining deals, silenced reporters, and families who cannot find their relatives after a sweep. The truth is uneven on the ground. There are places where roads are safer than they were. There are places where fear has deepened. In a conflict this complex, both can be true at once. There is another layer to consider: food as statecraft. When ports receive grain shipments labeled as gifts, that story travels fast. In neighborhoods where mothers worry about the next meal, it sounds like a promise kept. But gifts also create expectations and dependencies. If one supplier becomes the main lifeline, it narrows a government's options. That leverage is subtle, but it matters when votes are taken at international forums or when a new defense agreement is drafted. Energy policy will be the next frontier. Ambitions for power projects, including talk of nuclear cooperation or big dams, intersect with geopolitics and debt. The companies that offer to build and finance these projects do not just pour concrete, they shape strategic relationships that last for decades. For leaders who crave an electricity breakthrough, the appeal is obvious. For finance ministers tracking repayments, the risk is equally obvious. Choices made now will echo long after the current uniforms have left office. So what comes next? One path leads to a hardened Sahel bloc aligned closely with Moscow, coordinating security operations and bargaining as a unit on resources and ports. That path would deepen the political split with coastal neighbors, strain trade routes, and test how far Russia is willing and able to invest beyond trainers and grain ships. Another path bends toward a messy middle, where pragmatic deals are cut on all sides and local realities trump grand alliances. In that world, leaders quietly keep multiple doors open, even while they shout loyalty from the balcony. A third path returns to regional compromise, where security coordination is rebuilt across old divides and elections reopen diplomatic doors. None of these paths is guaranteed. The street, the barracks, and the budget ledger will decide. For viewers in the United States, this story is not far away. When a region that stretches from the Atlantic to the Sahara changes its security partnerships, it reshapes migration routes, commodity flows, and the fight against groups that target civilians from Bamako to the Mediterranean. It shifts where Washington can gather intelligence and how it engages with partners. It affects uranium markets that power reactors and gold markets that move quietly through global cities. It is not an abstract map. It is part of the same world that sets prices in your grocery store and policies at your airport. If there is a single thread that runs through all of this, it is the demand for dignity. Populations across West Africa are tired of being treated as pawns in someone else's strategy. They will embrace whoever shows up with respect, speed, and solutions that work in their villages. Russia has read that demand and moved to meet it in ways that fit its interests. The question is whether those solutions will last, and whether they will widen or narrow the room for citizens to speak freely, do business fairly, and live without fear. As we close, hold two ideas at once. First, the pull of any great power matters less than the push of local realities. A partnership that delivers safety and services earns trust. One that delivers only parades and propaganda will fade. Second, this is not a movie with an easy ending. It is a region where people wake up each morning and make hard choices. Some choose the convoy. Some choose the classroom. Some choose the road out. The outcome will be written by those choices, not by speeches in foreign capitals. Before you go, I want to hear from you, because this channel is a conversation, not a monologue. If you lived in a town where the police budget is thin and militants tax the road, would you accept a foreign partner who promises quick results even if the plan is secret? If your family's bread price dropped because of a grain shipment from abroad, would that change how you view that country's influence? If your region split from a long-standing bloc in the name of sovereignty, Would you support the split if it meant more border checks and higher transport costs? And if abuses were reported in the name of restoring order, where would you draw the line? Tell me your answers in the comments, and tell me what you think people in the Sahel most want from any partner, East or West. If you found value in this deep dive, make sure you subscribe to AfriPol Lens, turn on notifications so you do not miss our next investigation, and share this episode with someone who cares about Africa's future and the world's shifting balance of power. Like the video if it helped you see the story more clearly, and add your perspective below. I read the comments, and I learn from them. Together, we can keep this discussion honest and grounded in the real lives of people on the front lines.